I was given the generic talk about time, the relationship of time in medicine and technology. And I can't tell you how much I have agonized over which aspects of this to focus on. Because I could give a doomsday talk on what happened in the last year and the court battles and what that might mean for the actual availability of your physician at any given time with another 100 million insured lives. I could give a talk about what happens in the microcosm of a doctor's office. I can give a talk about a whole bunch of things. And so let me start off by warning you that in medical school, nobody learns about time, time management, economics, or business. In fact, everybody that went into medicine at some point in their life said the following thing: I went into medicine so I can help people and save lives. And the reality, which we saw earlier, was in the last 100 years, people live 50% longer. It has nothing to do with medicine. It has to do with sewage. But that's a different story. How do we spend our time in medicine? And realize that I look at this very differently. I look at this as a doctor. And by the way, Dolores, I sent you the whole picture for a reason. And it's not a bad reason, but I wanted somebody to see the introspective person sitting in a waiting room or sitting in a doctor's office. When you come into the doctor's office, there will be a wait, or else you don't have a good doctor. I'm sorry. It's just going to happen. And the reason it happens is not because your problem is not important. The reason why it happens, hopefully, is because your problem is not the most important. And think about that in the context of medicine. Whenever you have news to get from your physician, that news cannot come fast enough. We are in an amazing, amazing time, which I'll get to in a second, where the news your physician has is going to get pumped out to you. The things that we've heard about over the last little bit with your car is happening in the doctor's office. The Standard Times read an article a couple weeks ago now talking about the push of laboratory data to the individual via the internet. You just have to sign up for it with certain practices. That's an amazing concept as an individual trying to grasp the complexities of medicine. And sometimes that complexity is going to hit you full front, and you need your doctor to try to give you some clarity. I had a discussion a couple of times today talking about this weird space and time that happens when I tell somebody bad news. And I often sit there with all the cards on my side of the deck saying, this is the bad news. Go home and whatever you do, do not look it up on the internet. You will be scared for a month, and I need to talk to you next week about what we're actually going to do. So realize that the next place that I see time being completely misaligned is the operating room. I get the privilege of being a surgeon as well as the guy you see in the office. And whenever I sit down and talk with somebody before they go into surgery, their loved one's sitting next to them, they're lying on a gurney, and I tell them the following thing. You, this is going to feel like 3 minutes. You, this is going to feel like 3 days. The reality is it's going to take about 3 hours, and you'll be back together. Anesthesia is a wonderful thing. It really is. But having been on the other side of that waiting, there is no amount of time that a loved one can possibly comprehend. Things are going well in that room. In fact, we make a special point in the middle of some of the longer surgeries we do to call out to the loved one to say, this is what's going on, and it's going well. We're happy, just so they can have some peace and comfort. And then the last thing is what happens in the actual doctor's room. I was talking to a buddy earlier today, and he said, you know, I bring in a list, and I hope everybody brings in a list. White coats are really scary. You'll forget everything. I got all the cards in the room, as I already told you, so make sure you know what you need to talk about. There is a limit on the time you have in medicine because of forces that we won't even get into, and you need to know that. over the last year, in my profession, there have been two major things that I think have been really groundbreaking and very earth-shaking. And I think I need to bring these out because of the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, Massachusetts has universal health care. It brought in a huge influx of patients into my realm of care. If any of you in any business suddenly take on 50% more business, you're going to realize you have a time crunch, and that is what it is. At some level, then, you have to decide how you're going to build up to that, or you're going to take it the way it is. And what's really strange, to get to the automobile comment, is every time I get my car serviced, I get a talking to from the service manager who says, "You're going to get a survey from XYZ car company. Please fill it out with 5s. Everything you put down is a 5. And here you go. There's Consumer Reports. Please fill it out with 5s. What are the questions that they're asking? How long are you in the doctor's waiting room? How fast did the doctor call you back? How fast did you get your test results back? Did you have an ample amount of time to spend with your doctor? Some of those questions are ridiculously important. They are absolutely critical. That patient-doctor relationship that we so cultivate has to be there when those things happen that you need to get the data back from. So it's very important. But at the same time, the Standard Times ran an article saying, why the wait? And they listed gastroenterology, obstetrics, gynecology, and a couple of other specialties and said, it took us X number of days to get into that office. Why? We'll go back a little bit. There was a huge influx of patients into all of medicine, and it's going to get thrown again, depending on the political climate. There is a shortage of physicians. And so as a physician, we need to triage, figure out who needs to get in to be seen as quickly as possible when they need it, because that's really important. And then we also have to make sure that we make the best use of the time we have. This is my electronic connection. I killed myself to make sure there was no patient data on this. And if you look, this is a test subject, this is a blank screen, and this is a login page. So please note that. But with these things that I have access to in my exam room, this is new in the last 10 years, I can see history, laboratories, radiology. I can see what happened at the hospital you were in. In my case, I'm lucky enough to be able to see Boston a lot of times, that magical place where magical medical things happen in the South Coast. But in reality, that's very, very important, because if I want my patient to have some extra piece of medical technology or therapy, I also need to know that it happened, how it happened, and it has to get back to me. And I think that this is a very important thing to see because of one very important tidbit. The data that is here was entered here by someone or something. It is not a blank page. Now, let's think about that data. We had a conversation earlier today, which was really, really strange. I wanted to know how many times a person goes to the bathroom during a day. I'm a urologist. This is important to me. And I said, well, I can have them hit a button on a smartphone. And Arlen said, why don't you just see how many times the toilet seat got lifted up? The microprocessor will tell you. What in the world was I thinking? The data's there. You just got to find it. But the important thing is that data came in from a completely circuitous route. A lot of the stuff that comes in today into these things is pushed in there by a system that was created by laws. And I don't mean Ohm's law, I don't mean the law of gravity, I mean congressional law. They mandated that the electronic medical record that is used has to have a certain amount of connectivity to the laboratory and have to have things stream into it, which is great. If you look at this and try to dig through it, you will see so much information that it is paralyzing. So you have to learn how to dig stuff out. And then the other thing that I want to twist just a second is, all this stuff's feeding in. But at the end of the day, your healthcare provider is going to be tying it all together, is going to be bundling, but also entering a huge amount of data. Now, in my office, we have medical assistants, I have secretaries, I have nurses, a nurse practitioner, I have a physician. There's a pay scale difference. It's pretty obvious. At the end of the day, any businessman, remember, there's no business in medical school, would not put the top guy on the salary chain putting in the most data. But that's not true in medicine. So my challenge to all of the people that are out here in this embedded space is to help me input more data in less time so I can do more. Why would that be important? You go to one of these things as a doctor's office and you're incentivized by the government. I want to say it's about $44,000 over 5 years, federal law. You have to hit certain milestones, you have to do it in certain times. Isn't that great? They're going to give you $44,000. You lose 25% productivity for 6 months when you do this. I guarantee you're losing money at that in a doctor's office. And worse than that, as a society, you've taken 25% offline while we're throwing more people into the pool. This is a big deal. How do you deal with it? Let me go back for a second to one other thing that I mentioned, which is some of these systems will push stuff out. Patient has a lab, goes to the lab, gets a blood draw, gets a blood test back. They can get it live time. Historically, medicine has been very good at holding its cards, and we've had all of the cards on our side. Suddenly, the patient is going to get that card back very quickly, and there's a role reversal going on in medicine right now. And it's surprising to me as a physician that that's not 20 phone calls a day. It's only 1 or 2 a week. And I think the reason why is because as physicians, number one, we're preparing people a little bit more. Number two, the people that are doing and going to that level of connectivity are also capable of looking at a lot of the data as it gets streamed to them, and it's presented much better than it might have been with just a piece of paper and a walk out the door. I wore this white coat for a very specific reason, and that's because a couple of weeks ago there was an article in the New England Journal of Medicine which really caught my attention, and it talked about automated hovering healthcare over 5,000 hours. I could not figure this out at all until I realized that the 5,000 hours they're talking about is not the 5,000 hours that you're receiving medical care. It's the 5,000 hours in the year that you have nothing to do with your doctor. You're walking down the street. You're the diabetic. You've been told, hey, diabetes sucks. There's a lot of bad things. You're going to have problems with your eyes, problems with your feet, problems with your nerves, problems with parts that Dr. Hausladen takes care of. It's bad stuff. But there's a Big Mac, and you want it. And we're people, and that's going to happen. Now the question is, can you take that reading of your glucose and use that data in a way that's important? And the answer is yes, you can, because today that blood test can get sent over the Wi-Fi network to your computer, to your doctor, just as it's been said. You still have to hook it up. You still have to take the blood. You still have to do the test. And so the next question here is, okay, I know what's good for my patient. My patient listened to me. They know what's good for them. How can we make using or implementing that strategy better for that person? And what they go on to talk about in this article and what other people are looking at is how do you incentivize somebody that they actually do the thing that will help them, even if it doesn't help them right now. They used very interesting techniques where they had a lottery. You only got to put your drawing in if your pillbox was opened at the right time and was emptied, and things like that. So it's a very creative space where we have a lot of solutions, and it's going to have to do with pulling that data that people are able to collaborate from all sorts of different devices, the pillbox, the glucometer, whether or not you actually open something and use it. So at the end of the day, the question of what is the value of time in medicine is not just a question of when you're sitting in the doctor's office. It's a societal question. It's a question that has to come from all of us in general. It's from our lawmakers. It's from the people buying health insurance. Let's not kid ourselves. At the end of the day, my wife, who's a pediatrician, has to put in a series of clicks. She's in primary care, I'm a specialist, there's a little bit of a difference there. She has slightly different rules than I do. One of those rules is that she has to fill out a certain form in a very certain way, and it's done electronically. And when she was taught how to do this is very important for billing and data collection and all this type of stuff, and it's been mandated by the government. She was told, well, there's 3 things that you have to do for each patient. Each one's going to take you about a minute worth of clicks. So that's okay, that's about 3 minutes. It's not a big deal. I got about 20 patients to see, okay? That's an hour. It's an hour that I didn't have at the beginning of the day that I'm using for data entry. It might be a very important piece of data that we're going to ultimately get out. And as a society, we might actually benefit from it. But we have to recognize that as a society, we are going to take a tax for the use of that time. Are my expectations of time in medicine correct? Is it acceptable in our society to want everything now and yesterday? Or is there a value and a weight that has to happen? And that, again, is going to be a question that's much bigger than this conversation today. Because as we go forward, as our population ages, as we enroll more in health insurance, as we have a declining population of physicians due to retirement, maybe less filling the ranks behind them, we are going to morph that use of time in medicine in some way. I am very encouraged that the technology that has been talked about today is going to fill in some of that role and allow a more efficient delivery of medicine. And I look forward to that time when we can use the applications and the environment to more freely collaborate in the medical space so that the information that I get is not duplicated by another simply because we don't talk well electronically. I'd really look forward to that. And after listening to the talks today, I see that day much closer than I thought before. Thank you guys so much for listening.